Here today to give an update on the murder of Laura Ann Aime that occurred in the fall of 1974. We now have definitive evidence proving that Theodore Ted Bundy murdered Laura, and we can announce that this case is officially closed.
A 17-year-old girl walked out of a Halloween party to buy cigarettes. She never came back. And for 51 years, nobody could prove who took her, even though the man responsible sat on death row and confessed. That's where this story begins. Laura Ann Aime was not just another name on a list. She was a farm girl from Fairview, Utah, a tiny town of about 1,200 people sitting right in the middle of the state. She grew up on a property full of animals, because that's just how her family lived. Horses, dogs, cats. If it had 4 legs, Laura loved it. She had a horse named Arab, and her thing was feeding him red licorice nibs as a treat. After she died, that horse refused to eat them ever again. That detail alone tells you everything about the kind of present she was. Her younger sister Michelle was 12 when Laura died, 5 years apart, but they were inseparable. They shared a bedroom, rode horses together, and Michelle basically followed her big sister everywhere. She took me everywhere, Michelle said. As a 12-year-old, that's pretty cool to hang out with your older sister. Laura was the kind of person who made you feel like you belonged just by being around her. Tall, outgoing, full of life. Her dad used to take her hunting, and she had won first prize at a Utah deer hunting contest when she was only 10 years old. She was that girl, the one everybody remembers clearly, even decades later. But by the fall of 1974, Laura wasn't living at home anymore. She was 17, restless, and staying with friends. Her niece Tara later described her as a free spirit who was off with friends at the time. Nothing sinister about that, just a teenager figuring out the world. The problem was, the world she was trying to figure out had someone very dangerous in it. Before we get into what happened next, if you're new here, like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a case. This is Crime Files, and we don't let stories like Laura's get forgotten. Now here's the part that nobody talked about enough. In the weeks before Halloween, people who knew Laura started noticing something. There were reports made to police from multiple people saying that a man matching Ted Bundy's description had been hanging around Laura at Brown's Cafe in Lehi, Utah. This man had reportedly called her his girlfriend. He had also told her directly that he was going to rape her, and yet somehow Laura was still out there, still moving through life the way teenagers do when they don't fully believe the danger is real. Her mother believed it was real. Days before Halloween, Laura called home. Her mom begged her not to hitchhike. She told Laura she was scared. Scared something would happen to her the way it happened to Melissa Smith, a girl from nearby Midvale who had just been brutally murdered weeks earlier. Laura told her not to worry. She said she would be fine. That was the last conversation they ever had. On the night of October 31st, 1974, Laura was at a Halloween party in Utah County. At some point during the night, she told people she was stepping out to grab a pack of cigarettes. She walked out the door alone, just after midnight. She was never seen alive again. What makes this even harder to sit with is something her mother shared years later, that just weeks before her death, Laura had told her out of nowhere. "At my funeral, I don't want to be buried in a dress." She had even picked a song she wanted played, Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks. A teenager who somehow knew, or at least felt it coming. 28 days passed. Her family was in agony. When her mother called the sheriff's office to report her missing, the response she got back was, "What do you want us to do about it?" Think about that for a second. A mother calling about her missing teenage daughter, and that's what she heard. Then on Thanksgiving Day, November 27th, 1974, 2 college students out on a hike in American Fork Canyon made a discovery that nobody should ever have to make. Laura's body was found partially down an embankment just off the canyon road, near State Route 92, about 30 miles from where she disappeared. She was bound. She had no clothing. She had been beaten severely. A nylon stocking had been used to strangle her. And according to investigators, the condition of the scene suggested she had been kept alive for several days after she was taken, which means what happened to her didn't end in one night. It went on. That's the part that doesn't leave you. Now, Ted Bundy was already being looked at. He had moved to Salt Lake City just 2 months before Laura disappeared, enrolled as a law student at the University of Utah. Think about the audacity of that. Studying law while hunting people. By the time Laura's body was found, investigators had a pattern in front of them. Melissa Smith, 17, murdered in October. Laura Ann Aime, 17, murdered in October. Deborah Kent, 17, gone in November. All within weeks of each other. All in Utah. All connected to Bundy's movements. Here's where the story takes a turn that will genuinely make your jaw drop. Before Bundy was executed in Florida on January 24th, 1989, he sat down with investigators for what became known as his final confessions. He admitted to killing 30 women. He named some of his Utah victims. But when it came to Laura, he said he couldn't remember her. Couldn't remember if she was among his victims. Investigators believed that was his last game, his final way of controlling something, even from a prison cell the night before he died. Author and Rule, who knew Bundy personally, believe he deliberately gave false and incomplete information to law enforcement in those final hours. So the case stayed open. For decades, Laura's family lived with the knowledge that everyone believed he did it, but nobody could prove it. That changed in 2025, when Sergeant Mike Reynolds and cold case detective Jake Hall decided to take another look. The original investigators from 1974 had done something remarkable. They had preserved the physical evidence so carefully that 52 years later, it was still usable. The Utah State Crime Lab had acquired new DNA technology in 2023, technology capable of extracting a single DNA profile from a sample that is degraded, microscopic, or mixed with other contributors. They pulled a male DNA profile from bodily fluids recovered from Laura's body. They entered it into CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database. And in March 2026, Florida came back with match. Ted Bundy, irrefutable. Case closed. On April 1st, 2026, Utah County Sheriff Mike Smith stood at a podium and said the words Laura's family had been waiting over half a century to hear. We can now say, without a doubt, that Theodore Ted Bundy did in fact murder Laura Ann Aime. Michelle Impala, now 64 years old, stood beside him, the little sister who used to follow Laura everywhere, the girl who watched her big sister feed a horse-red licorice nibs on a farm in Fairview. She looked at the cameras and said, "I know that she would be really happy to know that it's been closed." So here's what I want to leave you with. A man who was studying to be a lawyer was simultaneously stalking a teenage girl, telling people he called her his girlfriend, and telling her directly that he intended to harm her, and the system around her didn't stop him. She called her mom and told her not to worry. Her mom called the sheriff and got nothing, and then she was gone. What does it say about how we listen or don't listen to young women when they're being threatened? What does it say that a confession wasn't enough to close a case, but a DNA match 52 years later was? And how many other families are still waiting for that same phone call from a crime lab in another state? Laura deserved better in 1974. She deserved the world to take it seriously when people around her were raising the alarm. And the least we can do now is say her name and make sure she's not just a footnote in a story about the man who killed her. If this case moved you, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, so you're here every time we cover a story that deserves to be told. This is Crime Files.